for thank you, for our second public meeting for Priority Pathways. We've been really busy since our last meeting back in April. At Cultmas, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Shauna and Kyle to kind of lead the presentation. But to kind of quickly reacquaint you guys with the project, we're developing a connected network of pathways across the region. Some are existing currently, others are more conceptual in nature. The idea is to kind of create a more accessible, options for people who, walk, bike, and roll. Whether they use that for recreation or, daily travel. So this past Sunday was the World Day of Remembrance. So Washington CT and DOT held an event in New Britain to honor more than 300 people who have lost their lives on Connecticut roads since last November. 20 to 25% of which were either biking or walking. So this project kind of aims to reduce that number dramatically by creating that safer infrastructure, whether it's off-road or protected. So hopefully we kind of protect our vulnerable users better in the future. Jumping back in the project, we're about a year into this thing so far. We have a great, consulting team with Tool Design and Foursquare. But I would like to recognize, Annika and Heidi from my team, and then Caitlin Palmer as well. They've been, a huge role in, the success of this project and kind of help me move this thing going forward. So shout out to you guys. So with that being said, thank you again for joining. I'm going to kick it over to Shauna, and she's going to get this thing going.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Welcome to everyone to the second public meeting for Priority Pathways Bike and Ped Plan. We really appreciate you taking time out of your evening. We know you can be doing a variety of things in your free time. So thanks for choosing to be here to learn more about this project. And maybe you have some questions that we can get to at the end. But as Mike mentioned, we're going to go over what we've been doing since we last met in April. We're going to talk about what we've heard from the community through several months over the spring and summer and fall with community engagement. And then we'll talk about where we're headed next. Next slide, please. So before we begin, this is the team that is working on the Priority Pathways project. As mentioned, I'm Shauna Kitzman. I'm a transportation planner and Connecticut market lead for Tool Design in our Hartford office. And you'll hear a bit more from Kyle Hearing, who is on our Foursquare team and is leading the data analysis. And he'll be walking us through the network itself and what that's looked like in the past several months and where we are with that now. Next slide, please. This is a quick walkthrough of what we're going to cover tonight. So we'll begin with a refresher of the project and its goals. We'll walk through the schedule and where we are in it. And then we'll talk about what we've collected through different touch points in community and stakeholder engagement. After that, we're going to share the draft network and talk about how engagement and data analysis has shaped that network. And then we'll talk about what comes next. And of course, we'll leave some time for questions at the end. Next slide, please. A couple quick notes as we get going. This meeting is being recorded. This is so anyone who wants to see what we covered and is not able to join us today can view the recording on the CROG project webpage once they post that within the next day or so. We ask that folks keep themselves muted. You are welcome to ask any questions or drop in any comments into the chat. And when we get to the end and we have an open Q&A, then we encourage you to raise your hand and we'll be fielding questions or comments from you. Closed captioning is available if you would like to turn it on. Okay, so we can get into the project background and why it exists. So next slide, please. So CROG is developing a regional plan to prioritize bike and pedestrian improvements across the capital region. So it's 38 member towns. It covers a wide geographic area. And it also covers some densely populated urban areas and some more low density rural areas and everything in between, as well as some unique geography. We have a major river that cuts through the middle of the region, and then we have some topography that doesn't always show up on maps, so it might look like walking or riding throughout the region is easy, but there's some real foothills in there that we got to consider. We are building on a lot of great work that comes before us. So there's many plans, studies that have been done at the local level, the regional level, and the state level. And we are building upon that to identify gaps in the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and to figure out how to best prioritize investments to make the biggest difference in building out a safe and connected network. So in short, we are working towards a safer, more connected, and more comfortable active transportation network for all people from age 8 to 80. Next slide. The goals for this project are really to reflect what we've been hearing from people across the region. People really do want to have a place to walk, bike, or roll that feels safe. And they also want options for everyday trips. So going to work, running running errands, visiting friends without always having to drive. And I'm a native of this region. I still live here, and you really do have to drive to get to most destinations. We want to make sure that people who don't have a car, either by choice or because of the expense of owning and insuring a car, or based on ability, we want to make sure that people who live a car-free or car-light lifestyle have mobility options as well. Next slide, please. Go to the next slide. Okay. So we want to make sure that people, no matter what their ability or where in the region they live, can use infrastructure that might be sidewalks that are connected in a network. It might be trails. We want to make sure that people are able to reach their destinations every day. So that might be getting to workplaces, doctor's appointments, school, and the like. We also want to make sure that there are safe and comfortable networks that support both enjoyment and recreation. And we want to make sure that people have safe options. Again, whether they have a vehicle or not, we don't want them to have to rely on it for every trip type. Next slide, please. Keep going, thanks. Okay, so as Mike mentioned at the beginning, we're about a year into this project. You can see that we are at the dashed line that says we are here, closer to the right side of the screen. We have done about 3/4 of the way through, maybe 2/3 of the way through. We started off with reviewing existing conditions and getting deep into all of those plans and studies that have been completed, including the Complete Streets Plan that the region has adopted. We also did several months of pretty intense municipal focus groups. We conducted outreach and pop-up events, as well as walk audits, which I'm going to get into in a couple slides. And Kyle and his team have been working hard on the network identification based on the data analysis and all of the engagement that we have collected. We are starting to work on an implementation strategy, and that is why we're here with you today to check in at kind of a key milestone in this project as we are not yet putting together the plan, but we want to get feedback at this point as we have a draft network ready to share with you. Yep, you can go to the next slide. So this was a pretty busy summer of pop-ups. We split up about 8 different events. We targeted different types of engagement across the region. We wanted to make sure we were meeting people where they are. We made sure to hit up urban locations, suburban and rural. We wanted to make sure we went to places east, west, north, and south throughout the region to meet with different folks. We wanted to talk with people who are riding and walking currently, or who want to, or who would never even think about it. We wanted to talk with all of those people about their what inspires their transportation decisions. We went to the Parkville Market in Hartford to kick off the season. We also participated in Juneteenth in Bloomfield and the Off Main Street experience in Manchester, and we enjoyed all the humidity that New England has to offer throughout the summer. Thousands of people participated in these events, and we didn't talk to thousands of people, but we did have about 400 touch points with them. We talked to a really wide range of people from the community, and you can kind of make out these whiteboards with a yarn on tabletops, and these were different ways in which we were asking people, how do you get around today? Do you ever ride a bike? If not, why not? Do you ever walk? If so, where are you going? Where would you like to go? And we really just wanted to dig into people's lived experiences. And a few themes came up again and again. So most people walk or bike for exercise, and because they enjoy being outside, they enjoy taking part in the 4 seasons of Connecticut. Many also use local and regional trails, and they enjoy walking in their neighborhoods, but they are not necessarily going on to main arterials to connect outside of their neighborhoods or to get to like a commercial center. The biggest concern is safety, and that also entails contending with vehicles who are drivers who are speeding, distracted driving, and crossings that feel unsafe. Can we go to the next slide, please? So through these engagement touch points, we developed these graphics that just kind of summarize what we heard from people. Through talking with them at farmers markets, community events, festivals, and at trail days. Most people like walking and biking within their neighborhood, staying in like a really contained area, or like to use the major trails. So your Farmington Heritage Canal Trail, Hop River Trail, Trout Brook Trail, those are major destinations. Next slide. Yeah, I already mentioned this, but a couple people that we talked to will visit friends by walking or biking, but most say they would walk more if they felt safer, which they don't currently. Next slide. And then this slide just summarizes that infrastructure that we talked about, separation between vehicles and people walking or biking would encourage road shift. And mostly people like to be outside. I think that's especially true in the kind of milder months. I don't know if as many people like to be outside on a day like yesterday, but yeah, there's some hardy New Englanders out there. Okay, thanks. We also spent a lot of time working with municipalities, including doing walk audits for several different towns. And these were really eye-opening. So primarily high-speed multi-lane roads come up as major barriers. Many people feel unsafe crossing or biking along. Um, as you can see, we met with a variety of different communities here, and this was an opportunity for them to take us out and show us key destinations in their area, and opportunities that they saw for positive change. Next slide, please. Many municipalities would like to build continuous and connected and safe walking and biking routes. That desire and the desire of the residents and business owners is not always met with the funding to implement that. So that comes up often in our conversations, but there is motivation to do so. And everyone agrees that roadway safety needs to be addressed through a holistic approach of changing the infrastructure of our roadways and making it them just feel more comfortable and safe to encourage people to get out of the cars. And education is needed both for pedestrians, bike or e-bike riders, scooter riders, as well as drivers. With that, we're at existing conditions, and I'm going to pass it over to Kyle to walk through.
Awesome. Thanks, Shauna, and thanks everyone for having me. So yeah, as Shauna mentioned, our team has been hard at work, both cataloging kind of what's out there and what's been planned, as well as trying to understand kind of what gaps remain. So existing infrastructure is really the foundation for all this work because we want to leverage what's already there. In doing our deep dive of what this includes, we noted that the capital region has some dedicated bike lanes, though they're mostly in Hartford and West Hartford, a little bit in New Britain, and features some great multi-use paths. As you can see on the map here, we've got some long stretches that take us from East Hartford all the way to Columbia, Granby, all the way south into Farmington. At the same time, there are some substantial gaps in what we would need to facilitate safe and comfortable active transportation trips for people of all ages and abilities. So something else that we've done is take a look at planned and proposed infrastructure. So on the next slide, you can see what we've been able to identify from existing plans. So there's already been a ton of work done to close these gaps. And we wanted to make sure that we accounted for this by cataloging everything that we could find out there, both in local and regional plans, as well as documenting the needs associated with these infrastructure recommendations to kind of give us a better idea for what, how these communities arrived at that need. So the goal here is really to make sure that we're building on the existing networks, leveraging plans that are already in motion to expand those, and then connecting the gaps where we still need to. So in really defining those gaps, which we can start to take a look at on the next slide, we did a lot of work around existing conditions. So this included analyses of demographic and employment patterns. This is going to tell us a lot about where short trips are most likely. Active transportation trips are, as you probably imagine, generally much shorter than other modes. So we can look at things like population and employment density to understand where that's most likely to be concentrated. We also cataloged destinations throughout the region, points of interest, to help us understand what locations are likely to be most meaningful to folks walking and biking. So to kind of illustrate that, typically employment trips are some of the longest trips that we make. So finding locations like grocery stores, libraries, other community destinations can tell us a lot about where infrastructure would be most helpful for facilitating active transportation trips. We also looked at travel demand modeling. So we wanted to understand where active transportation trips are already occurring because we want to make sure there's infrastructure to meet those demands. There's a little bit of a chicken or the egg thing going on where when we see infrastructure, there's trips in that area because people like to walk, bike, and roll where there's safe and comfortable facilities to do so. But something we also did was take a look at short auto and transit trips because we see these as opportunities for mode shift. Again, if you were to build the safe and comfortable infrastructure, folks that are currently driving, a couple miles down the street might opt to walk or bike instead. We also took a look at safety outcomes. Specifically, we wanted to see how trip activity interacted with crashes involving people walking and bicycling. These are opportunities for us to target interventions in areas of higher risk. So threw a lot out there, but suffice to say, we took a lot of different angles on the problem of kind of where should we recommend active transportation facilities, which helped us arrive at kind of the network gaps that you see here. So based on these gaps, we wanted to develop a draft network that closes the gaps and aligns planning around a shared regional vision, ultimately to help target investments in active transportation. The idea being that if we can get stakeholders throughout the region all heading in more or less the same direction, this diverse group can collaboratively work on building out the network and arrive at a point in the future with a cohesive network, rather than kind of building out bits and pieces that we then have to spend a lot of time and energy funding trying to connect. So this has been a very collaborative process. Engagement surrounding the draft network is very much ongoing. And on the next slide, we've kind of got an illustration of where we're headed, where we're going. So we expect to have something to share with you all for comment very soon. To date, we've been working, as Shauna mentioned, with the municipalities and the advisory committee, with those folks doing much of the heavy lifting in terms of review and comment. So we're sharing something with you all that hopefully needs less refinement, and you can really focus on providing us with the most valuable insights that you've got to offer. So what this process has looked like so far, on the next slide, we've kind of shared a little bit about where the network started and the sorts of feedback that we've got. So we sketched out the network that you can see here on this slide, shared it with the advisory committee, and generated around 170 different ideas about how we could improve it. So these are ideas including suggestions for new alignments based on plans we had not previously seen. So in that case, we'll take a look at that plan or recommendation and see how it does or does not align with the network, making updates where appropriate. As you can imagine, you find out about a new plan and then suddenly something you planned a half mile over doesn't make as much sense. So there's a lot of contingencies there. We also heard support for planned and proposed segments, which is great. You always want to hear that something you thought of is a good idea. And what we did with this feedback was kind of, note that, okay, definitely don't mess with this. This works. Because as we're moving things around, we don't want to break something that wasn't in need of fixing. We also heard a lot of recommendations for network revisions and alternative routing. So these are the sorts of recommendations that accompany kind of local knowledge that can be hard to keep in mind when you're, staring at this regional map. So that is always very helpful, and we can, in a lot of cases, pretty quickly tailor the network, take this path through the park to avoid the stairs, that sort of thing. We also heard recommendations for additional connections between proposed infrastructure. So there's already a lot on this map, but believe it or not, there has been even more. So in cases where we heard like, oh, we actually do really think that's a valuable connection, it got added back, evaluated, recognizing that local interest. And again, if we hear that something is kind of local interest, we'll add a note to make sure that it has kind of a priority through the revision process. And then we also heard a lot of concern regarding existing conditions. So these comments flag network segments that don't currently meet CROG's vision for infrastructure that's safe and comfortable for people of all ages and abilities. So this is something that in most cases wasn't surprising to us. We recognize that, there's a lot of segments of this network that would need a good amount of work for this truly all ages and abilities network to come into fruition. But, in cases where There's a similar nearby alignment, and this kind of gets into the feasibility concerns we heard. You know, we can consider the existing conditions, and especially if you want to think about kind of phasing the network. So specific to feasibility of proposed segments, this was really about context as we weighed different alternatives throughout the revisions process. So all of that culminated in kind of what we'll call the final draft network, which not only reflected those comments, but also segment level scoring, which kind of pulled back our existing conditions work. So segments were scored based on their population and employment density, the active transportation trip and short trip activity that we see in the area, and then the vulnerability of population served. So kind of equal parts art and science there. You know, there's some very long segments in this network that don't serve very dense areas that have a very high degree of importance to this regional network. So we didn't, you know, over index on the value of this quantitative analysis, but we did want to have that available as we went through. Again, that allowed us to do kind of one more pass of revisions, although, you know, we're constantly tinkering. But this gave us some of the additional detail that you can see here on this final draft network map. So we've got regional pathways, which we're envisioning as kind of the network spine. These are the truly critical elements that are going to support regional infrastructure connections. And this includes that darkest green as well as the East Coast Greenway, which kind of moves west to east, east to west through the region. We've also got community connectors in that kind of burnt orange color. And these are envisioned as priority network elements. So, you know, we would recommend focusing heavily on these after or while you're working on building out those regional pathways. You know, they're kind of one step below in importance, but still quite important for the regional network. And then we've got local circulators in that kind of tan color. And these are connections that either we identified or heard about through engagement that are certainly important, but less critical to the overall function of the regional network. And we've included these because it is important that all communities in the capital region have plans for infrastructure that allows folks to safely and comfortably engage in active transportation and also connect them to the larger regional network. So tons of work that we've done to kind of get us to where we are with the final draft network, and we're really excited to share this with you all in the near future. I think there's a couple more tweaks that we're going to be making, but look forward to hearing all of your feedback on it as well, and we can definitely talk about it this evening too.
Thanks, Kyle. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about what comes next. We are finalizing the recommended priority network, as Kyle mentioned. We will be able to share this out with you within a couple days. We'll also be workshopping this with the advisory committee at our next meeting in December. That committee is made up of representatives from state, regional, and local agencies, some from the private sector, some from the public and nonprofit sector, representing interests related to walking, biking, and public health. So with them, we're going to walk through how do we prioritize the network once we have more feedback, and once Kyle's team maybe finishes tinkering with it in the best of ways. We want to understand how should these different connections of the network be prioritized. We are still working on our methodology for that, but some considerations might be, you know, they expand the reach of the existing bicycle and pedestrian network across the region, or they cross major barriers and otherwise create important connections, or they benefit historically underserved communities. So those are just some samples of how we might evaluate when we're prioritizing. We will also be writing the plan, which will include some policy tools, outlining funding strategies. There are lots of different funding mechanisms, and there are many moving parts to that. So it is our role to help municipalities and CROG, try to identify those and stack those when appropriate, so that we can help see the implementation through. And we'll also be providing guidance to municipalities. Some of our municipalities work with a pretty lean team, pretty lean budgets. A lot of our municipalities are doing the best they can with what they have. So we want to make as many resources available for them to help implement the Priority Pathways network. We will share the final plan early next year and hold our third and final public meeting again virtually in early 2026. We don't yet have a date, but anyone who registered for this event will automatically get an invite to the next event once we have that. After that, in the spring, we'll move into plan adoption and that implementation. We might also work with CROG to determine if a governing body of some type would benefit seeing this plan through more long term. Community feedback is continue to be an important part of this project. So while we're not doing like bespoke public engagement other than the public meeting and sharing at the draft network for review and comment, we always welcome feedback and your thoughts. With that, I think we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, so at this point, our presentation is done, and happy to answer any questions or field any questions to anyone else on the team. If you have a question, you can drop it in the chat or raise your hand and we'll field your question or comment. I feel like I should say our operators are standing by. Okay. Kevin Sullivan, is the draft network map available online in interactive form? It would be great to be able to zoom in and pen around. Kevin, it will be available this week, and CROG will post it to their project webpage. Annika, do you mind dropping that link in? Okay, it looks like Chris figured out how to raise a hand. Hi, Chris.
Hey, yeah, that worked.
Cool.
Two-part question, and the first one's really, really quick. Can you just briefly rewind 3 minutes and in like a couple words, summarize again the prioritization process you're going through? It sounds like now, like the prioritization development process, sounds like you're figuring out how to prioritize projects. Could you, yeah. And then I have a reason for asking.
Okay, we're not quite there yet. We're working on our strategy. We're going to first start with the advisory committee for our next meeting in early December. We will work through it with them. So working with the latest version of the of our network plan, we will work through with them to figure out like which segments of this make the most sense to start with, right? So it might be low-hanging fruit. And as Kyle mentioned, it might not be like the most critical spine, but it might be something that is already being paved or developed at the municipal level and is like a quick win that we can start.
So actually physically, actually prioritize segments of the network.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking. Okay. The reason I thank you, that helps. The reason I ask is that I would suggest and advocate as an interested person for serious consideration of incorporating a segments or a project's connection to housing needs as a major component. The reason I mention that is that thinking of like something that enables potential housing. That's going to be something that other like indices and indexes or however you want to pronounce it from elsewhere have considered. They're going to have some, like a lot of them will have some housing component to them. But I suspect a lot of those were built pre-pandemic. I suspect a lot of them focus on connecting to existing housing, not potential housing.
Sure.
And I suspect a lot of them were built, in not all of them, but many of them, maybe most of them were built in places other than Connecticut or other than places like Connecticut, which has such a FUBAR housing condition, situation with such a shortage and such gaps. So I would crank up the consideration of housing and particularly like connections to potential housing. That's my suggestion.
Yeah.
Great work.
That
Otherwise,
yeah. Thanks, Chris. That is an excellent suggestion. I will this might give you comfort. So one of our colleagues working on the tool side of the team is Quinn Malloy. She is doing a lot of work on the intersection of transportation, land use, and housing. So she is going to be developing that activity that we're leading with our advisory committee. So point well taken, and I will make sure to pass it on to her. Any other questions or comments? Kevin. No, should I unmute you? I don't know if you're talking, Kevin.
How about now?
Yes.
Cool. So follow up to Chris's excellent point. The housing bill just passed, and I believe that it has bike ped provisions in it, but I don't know that it specifically said something like funding should be prioritized for housing that gets proposed or developed. His evaluation idea is excellent, but I think leaning on trying to get funding to be co-developed along with housing development is maybe the best way to try to get those things to happen. And absolutely, where there's new housing, it should be transit oriented, it should be complete streetified. Otherwise, it's not going to succeed the way we need it to.
Yes, good point. Thank you, Kevin. Comments, critiques, questions?
I was going to say, are there any segments that people see should be prioritized over others? I totally botched that word. Sorry. Any gaps that we're missing that you guys think of?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
You can't put yours first.
Just curious, for example, in Summers, you've got the state forest, which has a trail that pretty much runs almost north to south, and it connects here and there with either town-owned trails or land trust properties. Is that something that would be included here? I mean, it's trail. It's not like you won't take a bike on it. It's not a multi-use. It would be for hiking type stuff. That's really not what we're talking about here, right?
So with hiking, it's hilly and like single track or something
Yeah, I
like
would say
that.
single track. Yep. It's certainly not like a bike path or
You're
anything
not
like
going to use
that.
it to commute.
I'd say to a lesser extent, Patrice. Yeah.
No, you wouldn't use it to commute.
Yep.
Kyle?
Yeah, I think that would probably fall outside of the all ages and abilities criteria that we're envisioning here.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've explicitly set a requirement anywhere that's paved, but I also don't think that there's any unpaved trails that have made their way into this network. And if it was unpaved, I think it would have to be like compact gravel. The idea really being like accessibility for everyone.
Right. Okay. Maybe that's the next project, hiking trails that lead to pathways. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrice. It looks like we have a question in the chat. To clarify, we live along a priority pathway in Bolton. Are these pathways suggested or slated to be implemented? We live next to the East Coast Greenway, but cannot access it on foot due to the busy roadways. Okay, so Kim, you're not alone in terms of wanting to get to a regional trail, but not having good access or choice outside of taking a car. So that was a common theme that we heard throughout the process so far. We want to make it easier for people to walk or ride to get to a major trailhead or other access. These pathways are suggested. This is still a draft and are not slated to be implemented at this time. The hope is that we move towards a network in which we can chip away at building out a connected regional network. Okay. Rishab says, would there be a plan for maintenance and who would be maintaining it? Would there be a difference between how regional trails are maintained versus community versus local connections?
I was going to say maintenance is kind of tricky, depending on, I know like the Hop River Trail, when it snows, towns do not go and clear out the snow. It's just kind of there for the winter. In terms of, if a tree falls on it or something, that's generally speaking up to the town, unless it's on some DOT property, to my understanding. But I don't envision this being the public's responsibility to go out and shovel and maintain multi-use trails. And I was going to say, I didn't realize this before, but Bolton's literally at a crossroads in terms of a bunch of different priorities over there. So we're going to keep you busy, Patrice.
They do, and just to note, Mike, we don't plow or clear the greenway or anything like that. In fact, a lot of people will use it if it's enough snow for skiing or snowshoeing or whatever. So it creates a whole nother.
Right.
That's more recreational, obviously, than trying to get to work, but.
Caitlin from CROG did respond that most responsibility falls to the municipality, including segments of the existing East Coast Greenway. And I will say, like, during our municipal engagement in which we held focus groups with the 38 municipalities, there really is a spectrum of interest in infrastructure, like such as sidewalks. So some communities really want them. Some communities really want to fill in gaps, and other communities might like the idea of them, but property owners do not want to be responsible for maintaining them. And I would say a handful of communities that we spoke with don't want sidewalks at all, or shared use path is a dirty word. So we heard all different perspectives. And that is why we go out to the municipalities and just hear what their thoughts are and what kind of the temperature is in their town or city. There's a question here that iPad asks. It looks like we have an east-west route through Hartford out to West Hartford. Would that be Farmington Avenue? Is that a proposed protected pathway? Kyle, might we use this as an opportunity to look at the map itself in its dynamic form? Okay.
I would love to. So yes, you are correct. This is Farmington Ave. In terms of what form the ultimate network segments along this would take. I think that's not something that, you know, is going to be prescribed by this plan necessarily, but I could say that, you know, looking at the roadway and CROG's goal for level of traffic stress, there would need to be some sort of separation, just because of the speeds and the volume and number of lanes. For folks to feel safe and comfortable, it would require physical separation. But yeah, if we want, we can kind of cruise around the map. Yeah, you were talking about this Farmington Ave segment, and I guess sneak peek for you all, when you see this app eventually, you can kind of select any segment that you are interested in and ask a question. So in this case, you know, would this be protected? I'll just flag test so I know I can delete it later. Yeah, and since you're all here, I can also show you, it will let you draw a segment. So if, for instance, you say, you know, I would prefer this alignment, which I'll make up, so I know, again, not to consider it later on, you can draw something and then leave a note, and we will see that as well.
Thanks, Kyle. We were really hoping someone would ask a question in which we could play around with the map a little bit. And we will share this out, and then we'll have this open for comments or questions for a couple of weeks. And we encourage you to play around with it, poke around in your town or a place where you work or some other place that you visit that you really just think would really benefit from some safe and comfortable infrastructure for people who are not in a car. Are there any other comments or questions? As if anyone's thinking of a question, I will just respond to Kim's. I would love to walk from Lower Bolton Lake to Bolton Notch. We know that area is horrible for people who are looking to walk or bike. It's really almost impossible. So that was heard loud and clear during our engagement.
I think I heard something that there's going to be a little ceremony to acknowledge the lighting that's being put in underneath the tunnel in Bolton Notch coming up the next couple weeks or so. I think I heard
December
that somewhere.
4th, I think it is.
Yep, there we go.
Yep. They haven't given a time or any other specifics to it. And just to answer Kim, we actually have a proposal to put in a multi-use path that would run from the Notch all the way to the Coventry line. And it was roundly opposed when it was brought up, but we do have the plans and everything all done, just need money. But yeah, it was not supported by the community when it was brought up.
How long ago was that, Patrice?
I want to say it was pre-COVID for sure, and it was probably around 2017, maybe. BSC Group was the consultants on it. We had a grant to do the work.
What type of facility?
It was a multi-use path that would run along the north side of Route 44.
Okay.
And it would have been paved and protected from the roadway, obviously.
I would like to mention that CROG is holding a public meeting tomorrow evening for a different but related project. That is the Regional Safety Action Plan. Tomorrow's meeting is at 6 o'clock to 7, again, virtual. Definitely overlaps with the work that we've been doing here, and we are coordinating across teams. And just you can head over to the CROG website and look up the Safety Action Plan and find that Zoom link if that's of interest to you, if you want to do a double header with CROG meetings this week. It looks like Caitlin shared another resource regarding trails in the chat if anyone's interested. But not hearing any more questions, I would like to thank you again for sharing your hour with us. Hopefully this was informative, and keep an eye out as we post the presentation and the link to the web map for your perusal and review and comment as we go. So thank you so much. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, guys. I'm sure I'll see you soon.
See you, Patrice.
Bye.
Bye-bye.